Our top story tonight, the red line has officially been crossed and it won't come cheap. The U.S. will begin arming Syrian rebels. This after the White House confirmed the Assad regime has used chemical weapons against his people. And the Obama administration is considering a no-fly zone over Syria that would dump even more fuel on the fire. Sounds awfully costly for a war that most Americans don't actually want to get involved with. Joining us now to help put a price tag on all of it, because after all, this show is called Money, are Walid Faris, Fox News Mideast expert, and Zuhdi Jasser, president of American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for joining us. Zuhdi, let me start with you. Why now? Why is the president doing this now? What do you think? Was there a sudden smoking gun, or what was the final straw?
Well, as with Melissa, as with all wars, they eventually come to an end, and they're realizing recently that with the Qusayra loss, there has been a significant devastation to the rebels. The numbers killed have been increasing exponentially, and there's signs now that they're going to move to Aleppo, which we've said for years since the beginning of this revolution is where the revolution will begin and end, and there's a major massacre in play there. There's even a word that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and, more importantly, the Kingdom of Jordan have given the Americans and our country an ultimatum that either you help the rebels or you get out and you won't have influence in the future of Syria. So the cards have been pushed on the ground. Iranians have put all their stake in, and we're starting to realize the security matrix that's in the area that's been obvious for anyone that's wanted to look for some time.
Walid, do you agree with that? And if so, do we really have... do we have the interest to get involved at this point? Are we getting involved on the right side? Is there a side that we should align ourselves with at all?
Initially, the Obama administration was not very excited to do more wars or more interventions, military interventions, because you begin by arming, and then you're going to protect what you're arming, and then you're going to get reactions by the regime, Hezbollah and Iran, and you find yourself involved in a conflict while the president wants to withdraw NATO from Afghanistan. But we have counted on the Russians to put pressure on Assad. And the real red line that has been crossed is not just on the ground in Qusayr, it's the fact that the Russians are not putting pressure on Assad to stop, so that the Assad regime has been pushing and pushing on the ground. I think this move by the president, by the administration, is to put back a sort of a balance of power between the rebels and the regime, so that both of them would go to Geneva and begin negotiations.
Zuhdi, do you agree with that? Is that our best interest? Is we're trying to, it almost makes it sound like we're trying to stop the war from ending.
Well, Melissa, remember, doing nothing is a policy, and the current policy is doing nothing but empowering the Iranians, the biggest threat in the Middle East. Hezbollah cut off the water into Hama, into southern Syria, because they're trying for an ultimate solution in southern Syria and all of Syria. They've put all of their eggs in that crossroads, and if they lose Syria to the Sunnis or to liberty or to the free forces of the Free Syria Army, they will have a significant blow to the influence of the West in the region. So they're putting all of their eggs in that basket.
Who's on the side of the rebels, though? If you look at who is backing the rebels, it's the Muslim Brotherhood. It is not, it's Al-Qaeda. It's not people who are our friends either. I understand what you're saying about how, Iran is backing Syria and why we shouldn't be on that side, but that's not a compelling enough reason to be on the side of the rebels, is it?
Well, I think, Melissa, it is, because the old calculus for the last 50 years that the Middle East is torn between two bad choices is falling apart. The Egyptians are on the way to ousting the Muslim Brotherhood in their next revolution. The Turks have shown that they're revolting against the Islamists. So with the right influence, with our influence for liberty, there can be a third choice in the Middle East. But left to its own devices, the strong horse right now is the worst choice. So we can at least try to tilt it towards those that are at least closer to us than the evil of Hezbollah and Assad, and most importantly, Iran.
Walid, do you agree with that? Do you think that we have some interest in being on the side of the rebels, because the vast majority of Americans, 68% of which in the most recent poll that we've seen out, say we have no business getting involved in this right now? It is more than double those on the side of getting involved.
Because most of American viewers and those who are watching what's coming up...
It's about triple the number of people who want us to not get involved at all. Sorry, go ahead, continue. I just wanted to correct that.
Yes, Minister, because most Americans, when they watch the videotapes coming from Syria, they see al-Nusra, they see al-Qaeda. Reality on the ground is different. there are Islamists, there are jihadists in the opposition, but there are the secular ones. And we need not to make the same mistake we made in Libya or by supporting the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and Tunisia. So now, if the administration understands this equation and start to supporting the secular officers of the FSA on the one hand and signal to Qatar and the Gulf not to fund the jihadists, this may be the third choice that Zuhdi was talking about. But is this the policy of the administration? I don't know. We're going to wait and see.
Zuhdi, before I want to ask you about Iran in a second, but before we do that, let me ask you really quickly about the price of all this, because the show is called Money after all, and that is why we're talking about it, because it's ultimately going to be taxpayer dollars that are on their way to this battle. Estimates are that a no-fly zone based in Jordan alone could cost in the neighborhood of $50 million a day. Where does it go from there? How much does this cost? I mean, that's just one little item. That's the tip of the iceberg.
Well, remember, the cost of this would be waged. We're putting in hundreds of millions into humanitarian aid. And the longer we let this go on, the rebels are not going to give up. They're going to either see themselves in the tens of millions disappear, or they're going to see Assad defeated. So the humanitarian aid by itself, we could limit in the next year, make it less by helping the rebels ultimately win and allow Syrians to come back and to decrease the costs in Jordan and Turkey. Not to mention, if you look at Libya, for example, it was a little over 1.5 to 2 billion in 6 months. So that cost, I think, pales in comparison to the regional loss and the cost to Israel and other allies in the region if Iran feels like it can do what it wants and threaten the entire region into a war that's spilling over into Lebanon and elsewhere. And we're going to end up paying at some point, Melissa.
Speaking of Iran, it is election day. Waleed, what do you make of that? Is there any change on the way? Is there any chance it's a free and fair election? I mean, what significance should Americans here at home watching make of seeing Iranians go to the poll as we're watching them right there?
Full, fair, liberal, democratic elections? No, we know that. But at the same time that the next president could be a more moderate element, that's very possible. At the end of the day, if there is no real democratic revolution in Iran, and the Ayatollah regime would go down, it's going to be a series of movies, as we've seen in the 90s. We had a moderate leader in Iran elected, Mr. Khatami. It did not change. The real control in Iran is for the Pasdaran, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Yeah. So we need to actually support the Iranian people, the green movement, the democratic elements of Iran. That should be U.S. policy.
Waleed, your thoughts on this election real quick before we go.
And I would say that the moderates are really off the ballot. The moderates that are there are a sham. The moderate from the 90s was a sham because the supreme leader really was still there. So at the end of the day, I think it's better to have a leader who really says what he feels rather than conceals it and gets us to the table and gets us falsely anesthetized into really what the real global ends game is for the Iranians.
Zuhdi Jasser, Waleed Fares, thank you, both of you, for your time. We appreciate it. Great insight.
Thanks, Melissa.
Time for